Heartwarming moment. Hidden sheriff revealed at unauthorized black wedding. Inspiring community. Mariah Carter stood in the middle of the crowded park, her heart racing as she took in the vibrant colors of the wedding decorations. The sun beamed down, casting a warm glow on Janelle and her fiancé Darnell, who were blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just beyond their joyous bubble. But even amidst the laughter and flowing music of the celebration, Mariah couldn't shake the weight of her neighbor's judgment hanging over her like a dark cloud. The wedding venue, their beloved community park, had come under scrutiny, deemed unauthorized due to a missing permit. She knew Ms. Wilkins wouldn't let this slide. The former community leader's reputation for strict adherence to rules was notorious, and anything that strayed from her meticulously designed vision of order was met with scrutiny. That wedding doesn't belong here, echoed in Mariah's mind, paired with the disdainful look Ms. Wilkins had given her at the last town meeting. With a tight chest, Mariah braced herself for the upcoming confrontation. As the scent of Louisiana gumbo wafted through the air, Mariah was momentarily soothed with thoughts of family traditions and love. Janelle had always dreamed of this day, adorned in her grandmother's wedding dress, echoing the beautiful ceremonies that had taken place over generations. Torn between the excitement of the event and the dread of Ms. Wilkins' disapproval, Mariah felt like a circus performer on a tightrope. With a jolt, she was pulled from her thoughts by the crunch of gravel underfoot. Ms. Wilkins stood before her, arms crossed and lips pursed. "I'm here to discuss your sister's wedding," she declared, her voice sharp. Each word felt like a jab, piercing the lightness surrounding them. She threatened to report the unauthorized wedding, her posture taut with authority. Mariah's heart sank. She fought against the rising tide of anger and fear. Could she really leave Janelle's biggest moment in the hands of this woman? Just when hope began to dim, Janelle called her to the side. "You won't believe who I invited," she whispered, excitement dancing in her eyes. "Sheriff John. He might be able to help." The mention of John sent a pulse of anxiety through Mariah. He was a figure wrapped in controversy, a former troublemaker turned local lawman, who understood prejudice all too well. Swallowing her pride, she realized reaching out to John was their only shot. With the clock ticking down, Mariah picked up her phone, her palms sweaty. Her heart pounded as she dialed, each ring echoing her anxiety. As soon as he answered, she poured out her fears, her love for Janelle burning bright in her voice. Would he show up? Just then the ground cracked open with fresh hope. On the day of the wedding, amidst emotional vows and tears, Sheriff John appeared, tall and steadfast, not just enforcing law but embodying unity. He represented safety in the sea of judgment, his presence a reminder that love and commitment transcended barriers. As the ceremony unfolded with laughter amid the echoes of music, Mariah's heart swelled with gratitude. But lingering in the air was Ms. Wilkins' reaction, poised and ready. Would she concede in the face of such love? Would her rigid beliefs soften? As Mariah watched their families come together, a swirling mix of joy and tension held her captive. Would the community embrace change, or let tradition overshadow love? The questions hung thick like the humid southern air, fueling Mariah's anxiety for a resolution that loomed just out of reach. Mariah felt as if she was suspended in time, the laughter of friends and family melding with the gentle breeze, pulling at her heart. With every smile shared between Janelle and Darnell, she prayed that Ms. Wilkins would see their love, not just their paperwork. But then it happened. From across the park, the unmistakable clip of Ms. Wilkins' heels echoed like a ticking clock, drawing everyone's attention. Mariah's breath caught in her throat as she watched Ms. Wilkins approach, eyes narrowed, her expression a firm mask of disapproval. Mariah held her breath, the fear of confrontation sending prickles across her skin. Raising her hand to get Janelle's attention, she felt panic settle in her chest. She hesitated. The moment felt charged, almost electric. But before she could speak, Sheriff John stepped forward, a calm presence amidst the tension. "Ms. Wilkins," he said, his voice steady, "I believe it's time for us to discuss this matter." There was an undeniable authority in his tone that made the crowd shift, eyes darting back and forth between him and Ms. Wilkins. "Oh, I see you've chosen to support this disruption," Ms. Wilkins snapped, her voice dripping with scorn. Mariah braced herself for the fight. If there was one thing Ms. Wilkins hated more than a lack of permits, it was anyone challenging her authority. John took a deep breath and continued, "This isn't just about rules. It's about community." about celebrating love. Isn't that what we're all aiming for? Mariah's heart fluttered. She had always known John had the potential to understand, but she had never imagined he'd step in like this. Ms. Wilkins seemed to falter, her stern mask slipping for just a moment. As the gaze of the community turned to her, Mariah saw a flicker of something, perhaps doubt or confusion. "This event isn't authorized," she replied, her voice weaker now, revealing cracks beneath her strict exterior. "That might be true," John conceded, sympathy flickering in his eyes. "But do we really want to be the ones who tear down a celebration? Respecting tradition is vital, but love should reign above all." The murmur of agreement rose from the crowd, voices of support knitting around Janelle and Darnell like a shroud of warmth. Mariah felt the palpable shift in the atmosphere, the energy swirling as hope danced on everyone's lips. Seeing the tension in Ms. Wilkins' stance waver, Mariah stepped forward, her heart pounding. "Janelle's wedding isn't just a party. It's our family's history. It's our tradition, our joy." The crowd began to clap, an unspoken alliance forming as they rallied around the newlyweds. The rhythm of their hearts echoed like a drumbeat, a swell of love enveloping the park. "Please, Ms. Wilkins," Mariah begged. "Think of the joy this brings. Think of our community." With each word she watched Ms. Wilkins' expression soften, just a fraction of a beat. A new emotion flickered through her eyes. Was it acceptance? It was fleeting, but there. But just then, another figure interjected. "And what about the precedent this sets?" A voice quipped from the back. It was Mr. Jennings, who had always favored rules over compassion. Tension snapped back like a taut string, and the uncertainty returned, hanging heavily in the air. Mariah glanced at John, who nodded back at her, a silent promise of support. She took a deep breath, realizing they were ready to face this challenge together. This was about more than just a wedding. It was about standing up for love, for family, and for change. That as she squared her shoulders, Mariah knew they were at a crossroads, and the outcome hinged on what Ms. Wilkins would choose to believe. Would tradition or unity prevail in this moment? The answer lay just beneath the surface, waiting for the right voice to speak it into existence. The moment hung in the air, a fragile thing that everyone could feel. Mariah's heart raced as she glanced at Janelle and Darnell, their faces illuminated by the flickering hope of acceptance. She could feel the entire crowd's gaze transfixed on Ms. Wilkins, waiting for her next move. The stillness was charged, a symphony of anticipation. Ms. Wilkins shifted her weight, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "Setting a precedent, Mr. Jennings?" she began, her voice trembling just slightly, the authority that usually rang so clearly now edged by doubt. "And what if this all devolves into chaos?" "Chaos?" John stepped forward, the weight of his words grounding the moment. "Look around you. What you see is love, unity, and the very essence of community." His hand gestured broadly, inviting everyone to take in the scene. Children laughed, couples hugged tightly, and strangers shared smiles. What's chaotic about celebrating that? The crowd, sensing the momentum building, began to chant softly, "Love, love, love." Their voices blended into a powerful crescendo. Mariah felt tears prick at her eyes as she looked at Janelle and Darnell, who stood there, hand in hand, hope shimmering in their gazes. As Wilkins took a step back, almost as if the collective warmth of the crowd was physically pushing against her, testing her resolve. Mariah's heart skipped a beat. Was this it? Would Ms. Wilkins finally give way? "You might call it love," Ms. Wilkins retorted, her tone rising once more, "but I call it lawlessness." The resolve in her declaration sent a wave of panic rippling through the crowd. Murmurs filled the air, worries swirling as the tension thickened. John, unfazed, raised his hands to quiet the crowd. "And what if, just what if we let this moment breathe? A celebration for one day, a challenge to the rigidity that holds us back. Isn't that worth considering?" Mariah watched Ms. Wilkins' eyes narrow as they flicked between John and the growing tide of support around them. The warm light of the sun bathed them, contrasting sharply with the cool shadow of Ms. Wilkins and her rigid stance. It was more than just a wedding at stake. It was an opportunity for understanding. But what about the rules? Mr. Jennings interjected again, crossing his arms. "If we simply overlook the rules now, who knows what others will think? What's next? Complete anarchy." His voice was firm, but Mariah could hear the tremor, a hint of fear that echoed through the contentions of the community. John took a deep breath before responding, his patience evident. Rules don't ignite change. People igniting change do. He turned toward the crowd, a challenge glowing in his eyes. What are we willing to stand for? Is it love? Or is it a rigid adherence to rules that may have lost their meaning? At that moment, several voices surged forward, coming to life with affirmation. We stand for love. Tradition can adapt. Janelle deserves this. Mariah felt her heart lift. The collective heartbeat of the community resonated, harmonizing with the sound of happiness that only love can generate. She stepped forward, her voice steady. Ms. Wilkins, you have the power to embrace this change. To grow with us. To see beyond rules. A long silence filled the space, punctuated only by the distant sound of birds in the trees and the uncertain rustle of the leaves. Ms. Wilkins' expression was inscrutable, a mixture of vulnerability and defiance. But then, as if the weight of the moment had cracked her hard shell, she blinked, and a flicker of emotion passed over her face, deep contemplation. Her lips parted as if she might speak, and in that moment, all eyes were riveted to hers. The air buzzed with expectancy. Would she accept the offer of change, allowing love to pave the way? Or would she remain anchored to her own convictions? And just as it seemed a decision was on the horizon, a loud, unexpected crack filled the air, as if nature itself was joining the conversation. Everyone turned to see a hawk swoop low across the park, the sky darkening behind it as if the world was holding its breath alongside them. The hawk circled overhead, its sharp cry piercing through the tension that had settled over the crowd. Mariah watched the majestic bird, its wings outstretched perfectly, seeming to reflect the fight for freedom unfolding just below it. The rustling whispers slowly began to fade, replaced by an uncertain silence as everyone absorbed the weight of this interruption. Miss Wilkins flinched at the sound, her brow furrowed in a mix of concern and distraction. It was as if the universe itself was reminding her of the stakes involved, the fragility of the moment. But then, as the hawk glided through the air, Mariah saw something shift in Ms. Wilkins' expression, a flicker of curiosity intermingled with her uncertainty. Maybe it is time to rethink the rules, someone murmured softly from the back of the crowd. It was a voice that carried 1,000 untold stories, voices of those who had felt the sting of exclusion, of forgotten love, of being told they did not belong. The echoes stirred a profound sense of solidarity among those gathered. John seized the moment, stepping closer to Ms. Wilkins. We aren't asking for chaos. We're asking for understanding. Isn't that the essence of your role as our leader? His tones were earnest, each word landing with careful intention. You hold the opportunity to show that love can transcend old boundaries, to show us how to come together rather than apart. The crowd began to respond again, supportive fervor rising. We believe in love. Open your hearts. They chanted, voices rising like a tide. It became a wave washing over Ms. Wilkins, threatening to erode the walls she had built around her beliefs. Mariah felt her own heart expand with their words. Each declaration was like a spark igniting hope further in the community, wrapping around her like a warm embrace. She could almost feel the tension in the air lightening, softening as the power of love declared itself loudly. But Ms. Wilkins remained stoic, her face a mask of deep contemplation. But what future are we crafting here? She finally asked, the tremor in her voice betraying the uncertainty hidden within her rigid stance. What will this mean for our town? For my role? John took a step back, sensing the monumental shift happening in that fragile moment. What if, just this once, we validate lives of love kept in the shadows? Isn't that worth taking a risk for? The crowd swelled with affirmation, voices bleeding together into an overwhelming chorus that echoed through the park. The phrase love wins became a heartbeat, rhythmic and strong, ringing louder with each repetition. In that moment, Mariah felt the power surging through the crowd, guiding her forward. She took another step toward Ms. Wilkins, vulnerability shining in her eyes. We're not trying to erase the past. We want to build a future where love is celebrated, not hidden, where no one feels they have to apologize for who they are. Just then, with a graceful dive, the hawk swept low again, compelling everyone's gaze upward as it illuminated the fading daylight. It seemed to symbolize freedom, the image seeping into everyone's hearts like a whispered promise. Wilkins watched the hawk as it soared into the dusky sky. A hint of softening emanated from her, a tremor of doubt slipping away with each beat of the majestic wings. Perhaps she was beginning to see beyond rules, beyond fears. But just as another wave of hope began to wash over the crowd, a loud horn blared in the distance, cutting through the serene atmosphere. Curiosity turned to uncertainty once more as heads turned toward the sound, the tension crackling anew. What now? What were they about to face together, just as they stood at the brink of acceptance? The horn echoed again, a harsh reminder that not everyone was aligned with this moment of change. People exchanged glances, some anxious, others resolute. Mariah felt the weight of uncertainty press down like a storm cloud threatening to burst. What could distract them now, just as they were gathering the courage to fight for their truth? When the source of the horn revealed itself, an old pickup truck lumbered into view, its rust-colored frame a remnant of days gone by. It rolled to a stop a few yards from the crowd, dust swirling in its wake like a dread-filled omen. As the engine sputtered off, the truck door swung open, and out stepped Sheriff Landon. His uniform crisp against the fading daylight, he stood tall, hands resting firmly on his hips. The air became electric. There was an unspoken sense of tension as he surveyed the crowd, the hawk now a distant silhouette high above. As the sheriff's eyes landed on Mariah, she felt her heart race. He was known for his unyielding stance, a gatekeeper of the status quo. Would he support the town or stifle it? With an air of authority, Sheriff Landon approached, his brows knit with seriousness. "What's going on here?" he called out, his grave voice slicing through the whispers. Fidgeting and murmurs rippled through the crowd. The tide of determination that had surged moments ago now faced an unexpected challenge. John surged forward, stepping just in front of Mariah. "We're standing up for love, Sheriff. We're demanding understanding and acceptance." His voice was strong, even as it trembled with apprehension. Landon's expression remained unreadable, a mask that held years of tradition tightly locked. "This isn't the time or the place for such things. You know how the town operates. There are rules. Rules that hurt people," Mariah blurted, the words spilling out before she could catch her breath. She stepped beside John, infusing the moment with her passion. "We're demanding change. Our love is not a crime." The sheriff's jaw tightened, his eyes flickering to Ms. Wilkins, who stood frozen at the edge of the throng. The sharp division between duty and progress was reopening, and they all felt it. Ms. Wilkins had stayed tense, caught in her own storm, but now she appeared to reconsider her footing. "Don't you see?" Mariah's voice raised, pushing through the fear. "We can do better. What kind of town do we want to be? One that shuns those who love? Or one that embraces everyone?" The weight of silence settled between them as her words hung in the air. Time appeared to stretch, an eternity where all eyes held their breath, awaiting the sheriff's response. She could almost read the shifting sand beneath his feet. The ground that had seemed stable for far too long was beginning to quake. Landon took a step back, caught off guard, his hardened exterior beginning to falter. "You don't know what you're asking for," he muttered. Yet the resolve in his tones lacked the strength of his earlier authority. "Maybe we don't," John posed softly, "but is it really so frightening to envision a life built on empathy instead of fear? Aren't we all just human, looking for love and acceptance?" The crowd began to stir anew, emotions igniting with the possibility lingering in the air. Mariah glanced around, searching faces lit with hope, hearts seeking connection. Just then the hawk screamed again, a clarion call that resonated deep within. Mariah let that be the sign. She was certain they were standing on the edge of something significant. But would Sheriff Landon stand with them? Could he break free from the chains of tradition to embrace change? The question echoed as the crowd shifted in anticipation, the air thick with the weight of possibility. The air around Mariah crackled with nerves, the world holding its breath at the precipice of change. She could see the sheriff's internal struggle play out on his face. This wasn't just about rules for him. It was about tradition, family, and his place in it all. There was so much at stake. From behind the crowd came a soft-voiced Ms. Wilkins. She had stepped into the light, her stature poised but trembling under the weight of what lay ahead. "Sheriff," she called gently, "you know us. You stand for our safety, for our community. But isn't this fight for love a part of that?" Landon glanced towards her, his expression softening just the slightest bit. It was a crack in his armor. Mariah felt a swell of hope, urging her on. "There are young people here living in fear, ashamed of who they are. Don't you want them to stand tall? We're not just fighting for ourselves. This is about everyone in the community, about the future. A low murmur coursed through the crowd, drowning Mariah's words for the moment. Some nodded in agreement, while others cast their gaze downcast, torn between loyalty and the desire for acceptance. Mariah's heart raced, the moment teetering on the edge of a cliff. Then, unexpectedly, Landon took a step forward, his jaw still set, but his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to see harm come to anyone," he said, the strength diminishing in his tone. Maybe there was room for conversation, she thought. Maybe there was an opening. A hand shot up from the edge of the crowd. It was Charlie, an older gentleman with a weathered face but bright eyes, full of kindness. "Landon, we need you," he pleaded. "Don't you see? These rules that you uphold. They're hurting people. It's about time we change them." "Exactly," John echoed, the fire in his voice rising again. "We need to rewrite the script. Let us not just preserve, let us evolve." Landon remained silent. Mariah could see the wheels turning in his mind, each twist and turn causing confusion and contemplation. In that moment of silence, Mariah dared to hope. Change could be possible. The sheriff looked around, his eyes meeting each individual in the crowd. Was he feeling their resolve? Could he sense what they needed? Slowly, he lifted his chin and stepped fully into the circle of light, breaking through the shadows of doubt. He took a deep breath, and Mariah's stomach twisted with anticipation. "I can't make promises right now." "But," he started, his voice suddenly firmer, "I will hear you. We can have this conversation. We need to talk about how to support everyone in our town." An eruption of gasps and whispers met his words, hope igniting amongst the crowd like fireworks lighting the night sky. The palpable tension shifted to something electric. Mariah couldn't help the smile spreading across her face. This was a breakthrough. But just then, a loud shout broke through the crowd, a sharp tone that sliced the moment. "What is all this noise about?" A familiar figure emerged from the back, feet stomping heavy against the ground. It was Sarah, John's mother, and she didn't look pleased. Mariah's heart sank. This confrontation could unravel everything they had just begun to build. She shot a glance toward John, who seemed unaware of what was coming, his hopeful smile frozen as he turned to face his mother. "Sarah," he started, but her eyes were blazing. "What's this? You're standing up for some ridiculous cause? This isn't right," she shouted, her words filled with disdain as Mariah braced for the fallout. The weight of the moment anchored around her. The crowd fell quiet again. Would they all hide away again in fear and confusion? Or would they stand firm, now more than ever that they had the sheriff open to dialogue? As the tension coiled tightly, the fate of their fight hung by a thread. Would the community rally together? Or would they fracture under pressure? Mariah felt the heat of Sarah's anger radiating outwards, a powerful force threatening to suffocate the fragile hope that had just sparked amongst them. The crowd shifted uneasily, glances exchanged like signals of an impending storm. John stood frozen, caught between the expectations of his mother and his desire for change. The tension stretched taut, hanging in the air like a fragile thread. "Mom, it's not ridiculous," John finally managed to say, his voice stronger than he'd expected. "People deserve to love who they want. Isn't that what we're all fighting for?" Sarah's scowl deepened, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "This isn't just about love, John. It's about family, about the way things have always been. You're throwing tradition away for this?" A collective murmur rippled through the group, the fear that had been festering beneath the surface now creeping back in. Each face mirrored a different concern. Some whispered reassurances to one another, while others held on to relics of tradition like lost treasures. Mariah's heart raced. She could feel her own fear clawing at her throat. What would it take to keep them united? What would happen if this fracture spread, like a crack in ice threatening to break apart? Landon looked between them, a storm brewing in his expression. "Maybe it's time we stop equating love with tradition," he said, surprising even himself. The sheriff's authority hung on his words, heavy yet somehow freeing. "Change is hard, Sarah, but it's part of life. We owe it to ourselves to listen." The crowd's breath held again, eyes shifting back to John's mother. In that moment, Mariah could see the shift in Landon's stance. He was advocating for those he swore to protect. Perhaps he was beginning to understand the depth of his role, one that embraced love over rigid structures. Listen, Sarah said, her voice quivering slightly, you all want to change the world, but we're all connected to this town. Don't you see? Not everyone is ready for this. There are people who look to us for stability. Stability shouldn't come at the cost of someone's happiness, John replied. His voice firm now, a stark contrast to his mother's defiance. You think holding on to outdated rules makes us strong, but it just keeps us locked in fear. Love shouldn't come with a list of conditions. The crowd seemed to surge forward in support of John, voices layering into a chorus of agreement. Yes, right. Someone shouted. Change starts with us. Mariah felt a swell of gratitude for John. He was brave enough to stand against not just his mother, but decades of tradition. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah might still have more to say. It was as if the air itself held its breath, waiting for the next revelation, the next push that would either shatter their unity or cement it. Fine, Sarah shouted, the word echoing through the crowd, her defiance still palpable. But if you think altering this place will be easy, you're wrong. And if you think I'll just sit by and watch it happen, you clearly don't know me. John's defiance wavered for just a moment, concern flickering in his eyes. Mom, please, he urged, his voice softer now. But Sarah wasn't finished. Change can be painful, John, she stated, her voice now steady yet laced with concern. It can tear families apart. Mariah felt her stomach twist at the thought. Would this push hard-won progress into a chasm? Her gaze flicked to Landon. Could he see the emotional stakes rising? As silence enveloped the crowd, hearts beating in tandem yet torn between ideologies, one question hung in the air, thick and ominous. Would they reach out to bridge the divide? Or would they fall apart fighting not for love, but for the remnants of the past? And then someone called out, what are we going to do next? That question echoed through Mariah's mind, leaving her with a sense of urgency. They weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. Mariah felt the weight of that question settle over them like a heavy blanket. The crowd was no longer still. People shifted, searching for a way forward. Tension hummed in the air as eyes darted around, each person grappling with their own thoughts. What were they going to do next? Let us talk this out, John suggested, looking at Sarah, hoping to connect. We can't just keep yelling at one another. Families argue, but we don't have to let it destroy us. His determination rang clear. A beacon in the storm of confusion, Sarah's sharp gaze softened momentarily. Maybe, just maybe, she knew that her son's desire for understanding went beyond the political. It was familial, rooted in love. Her walls trembled, but they didn't fall. You don't understand what's at stake, she said, her voice quieter now, though still laced with urgency. Landon took a step forward, breaking through the tension. Maybe we need a space where everyone can voice their concerns. A community meeting, perhaps? This fight can't just be about one side winning. He glanced around the crowd, gauging reactions. Fists unclenched, concerns unveiled. Are you suggesting we all sit down like some big family reunion? Sarah scoffed, but her tone held a thread of vulnerability. Exactly, John said, eyes shining. That's what families do. We hash things out over food and conversation. We talk until we understand each other. The hope in his voice began to spark something within the gathering. A woman stepped forward from the crowd, her face highlighted with conviction. My son is gay, she said, her voice steady despite the quiver in her hands. He deserves to love. We all do. But if we're just going to keep shouting at each other in corners, nothing will change. Others nodded, their expressions shifting from doubt to a simmering resolve. Voices began to rise again, but this time they weren't angry shouts. They were calls for collaboration. Let us find common ground. Someone suggested. What do we want for our families moving forward? Mariah felt a swell of pride. Yes, we can build bridges instead of walls. She turned to John, the fire of hope igniting between them like a shared secret. The warmth in her chest made her smile. Yet Sarah's expression hardened again, watching the strength of their unity blossom. You think you can just gather everyone and expect it to magically fix everything? It's not that simple. But it can't hurt to try, John retorted, his voice rising in defiance once more. The crowd reacted, voices rising in agreement, emboldened. Hope spread like wildfire, each face reflecting determination and dreams of what could be. Fine, Sarah sighed. the fight falling out of her as she seemed to consider the weight of her stance. She glanced around, the emotions swirling within her finally surfacing. "If you want to talk, maybe I'll listen," she said, though a tremor of uncertainty lingered. The crowd took a collective breath, the air electric with possibilities. Mariah clutched John's hand, squeezing it tight. Could this be the turning point? But deep down, Mariah sensed the fragility of this moment. The path ahead would be anything but simple. Sarah's grudging willingness felt like a frail thread, easily frayed. Would the community really come together? Or would they see this fragile piece unravel? As the crowd buzzed around them, feeling emboldened, an unmistakable question rose in Mariah's heart. What if their first meeting revealed the deep-seated fears and pain they'd kept hidden for too long? Would they be strong enough to face the truth? As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow over the gathering, John stepped forward again, the energy around him pulsating with an odd blend of hope and anxiety. "Let us pull together then. We can start by sharing what we truly feel. Let us put everything on the table." His voice was steady, firm, yet inviting. A thread weaving them closer. People murmured. Was this really going to work? Could they sit around the metaphorical family table when they'd spent so long as adversaries walled off by anger? Mariah felt the knot in her stomach twist tightly as Sarah crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. Slowly, a man stepped up from the crowd, a neighbor Mariah barely recognized. "I lost my brother last year," he stated, his voice thick with emotion. "He struggled with his identity, and I wish we'd had the chance to talk more. To understand. To love." His gaze swept the crowd, pausing on Sarah. "I'm tired of the hurt. We need to have those conversations." As his words sank in, an older woman with silver hair clutched her daughter's hand and began to speak, her voice trembling. "I've lived a long time believing that love is conditional, that my son's happiness is less important than my beliefs." She choked back tears. "But I can see now that my fears have held us all back." Landon, still standing near Mariah, nodded, inspired. "That's it. This isn't just about issues, it's about people. It's about our families. We can't stay silent anymore." John grinned at how the conversation flowed. Voices mingled, stories woven like colorful threads in a tapestry. Laughter rang out occasionally, mingling with tears, the sharp contrast bringing a sense of shared humanity. It was a beautiful chaos, a snapshot of what could emerge if they all dared to step forward, leaving fear behind. But Sarah stayed silent, her brow furrowed as she processed the stories swirling around her. It was clear she was wrestling with something deeper, and Mariah felt a tug of sympathy. "Mom," John said softly, stepping closer to her. "What do you think?" "I think," Sarah began, her voice cracking slightly. "I think I've been so lost in my fears I forgot the most important thing. Love should never feel like a battleground." Her words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. The crowd held its breath, the moment steeped in uncertainty. Could her admission open the door wider? Would letting go of fear for love be enough to mend the rifts? Then, unexpectedly, a loud voice broke through the charged atmosphere. "What happens if we can't fix this?" A man shouted from the back, his anger palpable. "What if those we've fought against don't want to meet us halfway?" Murmurs of unrest rippled through the crowd. Mariah felt the tension spike again. Would this moment of connection dissolve under the weight of such a question? John's gaze turned fierce, fire igniting once more in his chest. "But what if we can? We owe it to each other to try. These stories are stories, they aren't just words. They're lives." Emboldened, Mariah spoke up too. "But if we close the door on this conversation, we might just lose everything. We can't afford to walk away. Can we?" Their voices echoed, challenging the doubts lurking in the crowd's heart. The fragile thread of understanding and acceptance seemed to stretch even thinner, teetering on the edge. With that, the looming question floated in the air: was everyone ready to embrace the difficult path ahead, or would the weight of past grievances pull them back into darkness? As emotions crackled like static electricity, Mariah sensed that the next steps taken by this fragmented community would be crucial. Each person stood at a crossroads, and their choices would either weave them closer together or drive them apart forever. Mariah stood in the center of the park, her heart racing. The air was thick with anticipation, hope swirling around like the gentle breeze. Every heart there was dangling on a thread, hung between fear and acceptance. She swallowed hard, scanning the crowd with anxious eyes. Would they truly come together? Or were they about to crash against the barriers of tradition and prejudice once again? The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over everything, illuminating the faces of neighbors and friends. Sheriff Landon shifted uncomfortably, the weight of his uniform like a heavy burden pressing down. But in that moment of tension, a spark ignited among them. Voices rose in support, stories poured forth like a river. I want my daughter to live in a world where she can love openly. A woman's voice rang out, cutting through the uncertainty with clarity. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, making the air pulse with energy. Mariah felt hope igniting like the flickering stars above them, each story weaving a tapestry of shared dreams. Joy and pain collided, echoing through the trees. John stepped forward, his face beaming with that fierce determination she had come to admire. We're here for love. Love shouldn't be confined. It's a freedom we all deserve. The crowd erupted in applause, a tide of emotion crashing against long-standing barriers. Even Sarah seemed to hesitate, her brows furrowing in thought, the sharp edges of her beliefs beginning to soften. We can build bridges, Mariah called out, her voice rising above the cheers. Everyone deserves to be seen, to celebrate their love. Together, we can make our community a better place. Landon looked around at the unity forming. Fear painted his face for just a moment longer before he stepped forward, uncertain yet somehow resolute. If we're to change, we have to accept one another. We've let tradition blind us. The statement hung in the air, reverberating as those around him absorbed the weight of truth. Surprise fell across many faces, including Sarah's. Could change really be possible? John's mother took a deep breath, the storm within her settling just a bit. I don't know how to navigate these waters, she admitted, her vulnerability crackling through the crowd. But maybe it's time for a new direction. One that welcomes everyone no matter their love. Mariah wanted to scream. Hope bubbled and overflowed as her heart pounded with exhilaration. They were closer than ever. I'm just one voice in this town, Landon added, his tone steadying, but I promise to listen. We can hold a community meeting. Everyone deserves a seat at the table. The crowd gasped, then erupted in applause, relief washing over their faces like the much-needed rain of a dry season. But there were still shadows hanging over them. Mr. Jennings, looking as stern as ever, cut through the jubilant noise. You're all willing to forget the laws that protect us? Where does this lead? His voice held a flicker of old fears, but not quite as stark as before. John stepped forward again, taking charge. No one is asking anyone to forget rules entirely, but it's time we review them. Love shouldn't be a casualty of regulations. His confidence sent a wave of agreement through the crowd. The energy shifted. Everyone was on board, hearts now intertwined with purpose. Let us not just seek tolerance but understanding, Mariah shouted, feeling empowered. A community meeting can pave the way toward compassion, acceptance, and change. We need to gather and listen. Together. A chorus of yes and cheers erupted, each affirmation rising with joy and urgency. The crowd felt it, a shared bond. It was beautiful. As night fell, illuminating the park with fairy lights and magic, Mariah glanced around at the familiar faces. She saw Janelle, Darnell, and even Ms. Wilkins nodding. Tradition could bend without breaking. They could have both love and respect. John grabbed her hand, pulling her close and beaming. We did this. It's just the start. But it's a beginning we all can celebrate. Her heart soared. All those doubts, that heavy fear, it melted away in that enchanting moment. Community came together not just for the permits and paper, but for the heartbeats of love that resonated in their chests. That in that warm, hopeful evening, as the stars emerged one by one, Mariah knew their journey had just begun. Change was brewing and they would face it together. As hearts danced with newfound purpose, she felt the guiding warmth of connection. Everyone was ready to cherish love, commit to understanding. And with that spark, the path was clear. They were not just defending a wedding. They were forging ahead to create a future where love flourished. This was their moment. The feelings lifted souls, mingled voices of acceptance and hope wrapped around them like a warm embrace. She couldn't help but smile as the park echoed with the strength of love. This evening would become the foundation of something wonderful. It was merely the beginning. Instinctively, Mariah thought of the audience. Folks, we need your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Hit that like button now to help feed the algorithm. Tell us what you felt about the ending in the comments. This is the moment to show your support. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. You need to take action and be part of this journey.